the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Future board meetings, September 14th and 28th here at 6 p.m. and October 12th at 6 p.m. here. We have no revisions to the agenda. Well, I guess we do actually under recognition, which we'll get right to, public recognition. We have a recommendation to approve a donation of $700 to provide students with a new scholastic book each month throughout the school year. Donors include Carrie Johnson, Sonora Gray, Cheryl Hodson, Amber Bretzman, Lisa Beaver, Marianne Milam, Shay Lauer, Mary Knight, Jody Rozier, Megan Hyde, Jessica Savage, Monica Smalling, Megan Blainer, Lucretia Swan, Joellen Studio, Keisha McKillop, Tammy Kiefaber, Becky Wagner, Melissa Denny, Tanya Roser, Amy Poole, Teresa Cody, Jenny Terrell. Books will be purchased each month for every student at Metro North in Mrs. Ross's kindergarten class and Mrs. Mills' first aid class. We also have a recommendation to approve the donation of $260 to provide students with a new scholastic book each month throughout the year. Donors include Linda Moranti, Merv Diener, Robin Unger, Lori Hitchcock, Teresa Fraze, Kim Hendricks, Lisa Wright, Carrie Hannigan, Becky Van Meter, Matt Engel, Connie McKillop, Terry Hand, Carrie Snyder, Tracy Asbell, Pamela Poe, Robin Merrick, Judy McKillop, Delinda Pinson, Nancy Crum, Lynn Smalling, David Alt, and Nancy Jo Hamill. Those books will be purchased each month for every student at Metro North in Mrs. Sterling's second grade class. I have a motion to accept.
So moved to approve the donations and thankful for them.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the donations on behalf of all those people. Motion, yeah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. It's been 2 weeks, I forgot what I was supposed to say. School recognition.
Okay, we've been in school now 11 days, so I'm going to go ahead and share. Mr. Boone actually shared something, and then you know that we do have the high school principals here, so they'll share some things also if they have something. But I'll start out with Mr. Boone. He says our custodial team of Teresa Baker, Kim Miller, and Dana Bosteller did a phenomenal job with summer cleaning and related tasks to prepare the new school year. All areas of the building look amazing. More than one new family taking a tour in the days before school commented how clean our building was. We're blessed to have custodians who take pride in our school and their work. And then I'll pass the baton to Mr. McDivitt.
Thank you, Mr. Kiefer. I'm not recognizing school personnel directly tonight, but I did feel like it was appropriate for me just to share what a great job the leadership at White's Residential is doing. CEO Ron Evans and their director of campus, Matt Riggle, and their entire staff, as with many places in the country right now and around our area. Staffing is really difficult right now, and the jobs of being what they call family teachers now, is what you might remember being called house parents, but they call them family teachers now, is an extremely difficult job. And certainly at school, I think it's probably without a doubt the most enjoyable part of the day for family teachers. So when we're in school, it's a good day for them. But I really just want to recognize them and the hard work that they're doing, that really important work they're doing. And it's just it's a pleasure to work alongside with them. We have been, I think, making a lot of great progress on just continue to nurture and grow that trust relationship between MSD and residential. And I'm really pleased with our partnership. It's great to work with those two men. So just want to give a shout out to both of them.
And I'll just echo that also, get the opportunity to be able to be with Mr. McDivitt, Mr. Evans, and Mr. Riggle on a monthly basis to share what's going on both sides of the street, so to speak, with residential and school. And Mr. McDivitt's doing a great job nurturing that relationship with them. So thank you for that. So at this time, Mr. McDaniel.
Well, just like Mr. Boone said earlier, commenting on his custodial maintenance staff, wanted to give a shout out to the folks at South High School, Mr. Louise, Mr. Snodgrass, Mr. Reed, and Mr. Middleton, for all the work that they did. We had the wiring project, the ceiling tile project, and the roofing project that's still ongoing. And being in the building throughout the summer, it was pretty messy and looked kind of like a war zone for a while. And so those folks really did a great job getting everything ready to go for us. And so very, very appreciative of them. Also want to give a shout out to the volleyball team. They won their season opener at Eastern, and they will have their home opener this Thursday. And our football team, our varsity football team, had their home opener last Friday against Rochester, and came away with a decisive win. It was 46-20. So good job to those guys too.
Thank you. And I know, Mr. Snyder, you might have something a little bit later, so.
Yes.
Talk about that later, so. All right.
We're going to move to the public comment agenda items only. We have anything anybody thinks to comment?
Like mom's watching.
All right. As long as the sound is good.
Okay.
Sound is good. Thank you, technology team, for fixing that. So, that's great. All right.
All right, we're going to switch things up just a little bit. Normally, we would move on to the consent agenda items, but we're going to pull an item from new business up ahead of that because we want to make sure that we highlight this. And I'm going to let Mr. Kefauver enlighten us on what that might be.
Well, and I actually, we're just going to turn it over to Mr. Snyder, and I do have a little write-up here, but I won't switch it over until he's ready.
So, basically, we had some parents and alumni from Northfield that came to me and Mr. Moore, and I think Mr. Hopper as a board member, so we've been talking. And, you know, there've been places around like Mr. Neal, tennis courts, Mr. Gannon from Sharp Creek, softball field, Mr. Wilbur Dawes, football field, and Mr. Weingartner, the baseball field. We have Mr. Campbell Deck for wrestling and Mr. Kaltenmark for the West Gym. And someone came with an idea about, we don't have a name for our track, but I know a guy that spent more time on that track than anybody else. And so we are coming to the board to ask if we can say, welcome to Wilbur Dawes Field and Lemming Track when people come to Northfield. Because I think, 40 years or more on the track? 53. So it's like, if we're gonna name stuff, we thought we should have a Lemming Track out there.
You know, I came here in '68, spring of '68, and there was no track out there. It was stoned. The parking lot was gravel, and big stones for the foundation to be put in. And then that summer, they put in that new 6-lane track. And I heard that Southwood and Northfield were one of the first all-weather tracks put in the state of Indiana. And the school board said, we'll add 2 more lanes in 5 years. 25 years ago. I feel really honored for that. Thank you.
So it wasn't my idea, but a lot of people you've had in track and in PE and in class over the years. I didn't think it was a bad idea, so I said, no, I'll take it and go with it.
Well, you
So-
know, half the people in this room I had. And it's funny to sit here and see all these people. And I've been, driver's training. She's in first 6th grade class. But, you know, when Kevin invited us to the school board, and my first thoughts were, after 53 years and Jane trying to get me to retire 10 years ago, the last 10 years, she secretly came to the board to ask for help.
To fire you.
So, Mr. Lemming, I worked with you for 8 or 9 years at Sharp Creek, and we got along great, and I went on a science and ocean trip here and there before we're trying to get it back, but before all this other stuff happened. And all I know is I couldn't agree more with naming that track lemming track if it's okay with these guys.
Thank you.
I can't imagine a better person. I had him as a 7th grade football coach. He started me out in grade school at Urbana.
Yeah.
Was there. Had all 4 of my kids in elementary, phys ed, and then he had 3 of my kids in track and cross country. Who better? Who better?
Well, I've been blessed with a lot of good talent. Scott Hopper, sprinter, holds the school record in 100 to 200 to 400. Was 9th in the state when it was pouring down rain. And finished 9th in the state. Of course, they always say good athletes will make a good coach, and it's true. And of course, Kevin, I raised him from the cradle with pole vault. Reached in the crib and took his hands and legs and turned him upside down. Bouncing up and down so that he could.
Before I was in 1st grade, we had a mattress on top of tires that I was jumping onto.
And your mom let him do that?
Yeah, with a pole.
I think I have too many other things to go on.
Kevin was 5th, and of course, I don't know if you all know that track and cross country is the whole entire state. It's not divided into small groups. It's the whole entire state. To finish 9th in the state, and of course, we've had several other athletes place in the top 10 in the state. Kevin was 5th his junior year, and his senior year is 2nd in the state, and made the Indiana All-Star team. And he got a full ride scholarship at Indiana State, which saved us a lot of money. But the biggest supporter that I had was Jane. 6 kids running to ballet and cheerleading, soccer. She did all that stuff so I could coach.
I move to approve that
That was all we
we
did.
rename that track, rename the track to Lemming Track.
I'll second that.
Oh, and I wanted to mention Mr. Driscoll, his son, I think it was 4 years ago,
Mhm.
the 4x1 relay team. We didn't have the 4 fastest sprinters around, but our handoffs were so smooth and so slick that we just outran them because of the baton exchange. And went undefeated, county champions, conference champions, broke the school record,
Mhm.
sectional champions, and we were set to go on to the state finals. And
So Ryan had appendicitis.
so Ryan was the leadoff leg, and I'm standing in the middle of the field. And Ryan always got us a good head start. And he was kind of jogging around the track. And we were in ninth place. What's the matter with him? And of course, we got way behind and couldn't make it up. And I found out later, the next day he was in the hospital, got his appendix taken out.
We just thought it was nerves. Oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Run, dang it, run.
Walk.
Yeah, walk it out.
We're running off.
He's like, "Oh, I'm dead." No, he enjoyed that so much. He
It
did.
was fun.
All right, we have a motion and a second to officially rename the track at Northfield to be Lemming Track. All in favor, say aye.
Thank you.
So we did move that up. If you want to stay, you may, but if you want to go, you can go too. So it's up to you.
Okay.
And you're actually talking about this Scott Hopper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He doesn't look that fast.
Not anymore.
Let's go outside and find out.
I try it every once in a while, I come out hurt every time.
All right,
He
we're
ran
gonna,
49.4, if you know what that means.
Really?
That's
Good.
pretty substantial, and could have run collegiate. I tried to get him to run at Purdue, and he would have brought his time down considerably at the college level.
Slacker. That's why you should do things and not regret it, I mean, because that's why I regret it.
all right, we're gonna move on to consent agenda items. First up is approval of the minutes from our last regular meeting on August 10th.
I move to accept the minutes.
Second?
A motion and second to approve the minutes from our last regular meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the financials, starting with claims.
This will be our last, this concludes our pay for the 21 school year, 2021 school year. So the next payroll would represent the new school year. Nothing major other than that.
I thought we were doing claims.
I saw payroll.
I don't want claims up there because
You
they're
know
so
what?
long.
Okay, we'll just do payroll then.
I'll move to approve payroll.
Second.
Motion and second to approve payroll. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we officially still have to do claims.
Yes.
Okay, so let's just do claims then.
Hate to disappoint you, Chris, I don't have any questions.
There's a big number on there too.
Yeah.
That was our first payment for our roofing project.
I saw that total.
I move to approve claims.
Second. Motion and second to approve claims. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, financial summary.
I don't know why it cuts this off, but you guys should see the bottom part where I make the little notes on there. I don't know why it does it on here, but.
Just the PDF doesn't.
Yeah.
Convert over properly.
So, what you're seeing here are, I did factor in a potential, wage increase. But we don't know that for sure until we go through the contract bargaining. And then I do have the basic grant revenues, all focused from the July 2021 estimated number that was submitted, but it does not reflect the actual September ADM counts. Hopefully in the next week or so, we'll have a better general idea of what our September ADM count may look like. But obviously we won't know the actuals until towards the end of September, once they go through their whole process and cleaning up and everything like that. But I submitted 2,000, and so that's what the dollars represent in there, based off of that number. And then that will get adjusted once we know what September actuals are. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of a preview then for the remainder of the year of where we may finish out at. And then for operations, nothing really has changed with anything in there, all based off of trends. So nothing, I didn't change anything on that as far as what we've been consistently doing. One thing I will say, and I don't know if you will notice that, or have noticed that, we got a memo from the State Board of Accounts like 2 weeks before our first payroll in July, saying that we had to change our object codes. And so the reason we have to change our object codes is to able to track the new legislation as far as the 45% of tuition support going to teacher salaries. and the funding floor formula where you have to pay more in teacher salaries each year, as long as the revenue increases. So they have to track that. So one of the ways they track that is through changing the object codes. So they gave us a whole new set of object codes that we have to use moving forward. And so you can kind of see there are some rows that are left blank there, and that was because of the change in the object codes for that. So really won't get a good idea of trends for a while until we get through a couple months of using those object codes. But that is something new that is represented on both of those cash flow spreadsheets. So anything with an object code 110 is strictly teachers. And teachers are defined as somebody that teaches more than 50% of their day. So counselors no longer count as teachers, even though they are considered teachers in our bargaining unit. So it gets a little tricky now with some of that. But that's what those numbers are representing there.
State tracks that on a year-end basis, or how often do you have to
6 months.
report? 6 months?
So on our Form 9, we report every 6 months, and it pulls in all the information based off what our accounting structures are. And then they use that information to determine out their totals. So like so now when they compare teacher salaries, they'll code anything with an object 110 will represent how much we spent on teacher salaries. And then whatever our basic revenue is, revenue support from the state is for that time period, they'll use that to figure out if we met that 45% rule or not.
And there will be some discussions about changing some of that legislation already, as far as, adding some people back, possibly counselors, and also maybe the benefits, because that's a big part of budgets also. So there's been a lot of discussion about that, but we don't necessarily know why it just became 45%, where that number came from, if it's just an arbitrary number, or what happened with that. But there'll be a lot more discussion about that coming up in the next legislative session.
Am I reading that correct? We were at 46.85% of that. Is that? That number there?
That's a different number.
No,
Oh, okay,
that's
okay.
a number. That number is how much we spent in our appropriations.
Okay, I was just
that
calling
we
that
got.
column.
Yeah.
So right now, they don't include any kind of benefits.
No.
into that.
Salary.
Benefits are not included in the teacher compensation totals for whatever reason.
Really?
That's why it needs to be revisited.
Yes.
Yeah. Remove the operation program.
Yeah, what's next? Oh, operations, I already mentioned everything with operations, nothing new there.
Oh. All right. Just hop into the budget review then.
Sure, so this will conclude our budget review for the 2022 budget. And then the next board meeting, we'll have our budget hearing, and then the board meeting after that, we'll have our budget adoption. So the last thing that I kind of go through with everybody each year is what we call the Form 4 advertisement, which is something that you will approve at the budget adoption, which just highlights what we're going to advertise as far as the tax rate is concerned. And so we all know what taxes are. I don't need to go through the definition there or any of those slides. I do have a video that I wanted to show. I thought it was kind of funny.
Where's all your money gone, Donnie?
Taxes. None. Nothing.
Where's all your money gone?
It's okay. It's part of the candy. No, it's not fun. It's not fun to what? It's the worst part of the
So he's things learned at a young age, I guess.
That's true.
So when we look at determining what tax rates or what impacts on our tax rates, there's a couple things that we look at. We look at assessed valuation and levies. And so assessed valuation is what determines the value of a residence for tax purposes. Those are things that us as a district, we don't have any control of. We are given what our assessed value is as far as the district-wide component is. We don't control what property values get assessed as or any of that type of stuff. But assessed valuation plays an important role in figuring out what the end tax rate's going to be. And so the other thing we look at is levies. Levies we do have a lot more control of. This is essentially, a levy is the money that we are asking to fund our budget. And so based off of that levy then and what our assessed valuation is, there's a formula then that determines what that overall tax rate's going to be. So our levies are considered fixed levies. And so on kind of like a seesaw there, the levy amount is fixed and then the rate is fluctuated based off of the assessed valuation. So if the assessed valuation is high, the tax rate is lower. If the assessed valuation is lower, then the tax rate becomes higher. So we look at historically where we've sat or where we've been with our net assessed valuation. You can see over the last 3 years, we had a little bit of a decline and then we kind of flattened off. Our assessed valuation has not increased as much. So it's kind of been a little bit on the flat side of things. But currently we sit at $721 million of assessed valuation for our district. So that can kind of show you how it's grown over time. We do get estimated numbers from the county in showing what our assessed valuation may potentially be. The number that we got this year was pretty high. Which was unforeseen a little bit. Looking to be, if it's true, was around 760 million in assessed valuation, which would be the highest that it's ever been. About a year ago, we had a study done through Policy Analytics. We've already went through all of this, but just kind of to review it, this was all happening when the pandemic started. But this was kind of a projection that was used in looking at what our potential assessed valuations would be over a period of time. The blue would be what would happen on a regular situation, where the orange represents if we were to happen to go into a recession. A lot of uncertainty was happening at that point in time because of COVID and everything else. So they ran a couple of different models for that. So from an assessed valuation standpoint, if we wanted to compare with our border schools, Huntington has the largest assessed valuation. Obviously, it's one district, one county, and so they pull in everything from that area, and then we would be next, followed down by everybody else. The one thing that's interesting to look at is the little dot. That dot represents the assessed valuation per ADM, so student number. So based off the number of students that we have, that comes out to be about $350,000 of assessed valuation per student. So that shows a pretty strong assessed valuation per ADM. When we look at our tax rates over the last 10 years, you can see that there has been some fluctuation up and down. A lot of that is driven by what the assessed valuation is. And so again, if assessed valuation were to go down, tax rate kind of increases. If it goes up, tax rate might kind of decrease. But as an average over those 10 years, we've been hovering in the low 80 cents. I couldn't find one for 2020, so I had to use the last one that I had access to. This just represents from 2019 what statewide the median average was for school corporations, and it was just at $1. And so you would see that historically we've been in the lower 25 percentile of assessed value, or of tax rate. And this is just another graph representing the same thing. You see we would fall in that 80-cent category. Tax rates, again, policy analytics use that assessed valuation to kind of give us a prediction of what our tax rates may look like over a period of time. And so the green or the orange would represent if we kind of kept our tax rate as far as our debt and our operations tax rates similar over a period of time, and how that would adjust as assessed valuation changed. The blue line would represent if we assumed our current debt schedule, which would show debt falling off. And I X'd out the 2022 there because of the bond that we took out that would be paid off in 2023. So that line would actually represent, just bump over to one column to the next side there. This shows tax rates comparatively with our border schools. And you can see there that we are the second lowest then of our surrounding areas. And then this is a similar graph that shows tax rate compared to levy amounts. And the reason I show this to you, because I think it's kind of interesting, because you can see, okay, Huntington, their tax rate, I think it says $1.08, but that $1.08, is that $1.08, Mike?
$1.03.
$1.03, that $1.03 generates over $16 million for them. And so you see our tax rate at 87 cents generates just around just over $6 million. And then you can see like Wabash City, theirs was $1.64, and that generates less than $4 million. So you can kind of see how some of those tax rate in dollars that they actually generate for that corporation. So tax rates are impacted on two of our funds. That would be the debt service and operations fund. Those are not state supported. Those are not federally supported. Those are only supported by our local tax dollars. And so assessed valuation plays a role in that. Circuit breaker loss plays a role in that. TIF districts, which can have an impact on assessed valuations, can play a role in some of those determinations. So our goal is to advertise a high rate and a high levy to ensure we can collect the full amount of levy for the budget we need in order to operate. So to do that, we use a low assessed valuation in our advertisement. And because we do a low assessed valuation, that's going to show a higher tax rate increase to get the levy that we do that. And we do that to protect ourselves because we don't know what our assessed valuation is going to be. And if our assessed valuation comes back lower than what we actually put on there, that could cause us to not be able to fund our budget because we may not be able to draw as much levy as we requested. And so you're kind of playing a little bit of a game there with that. But once assessed valuation is set, then it will typically level out to what it would normally be for us. So things to keep in mind, which funds are max levied funds and which funds are not. So our operations fund does have a set levy. So even though if we were to say, okay, I need $8 million to fund my operation budget, I'm not going to ever get $8 million. I'm only going to get whatever the levy is that is determined by the DLGF for that. And they base that off of the growth quotient, which is the next slide. You can see our levy grew from 4.3% this year, and it was 4.2%. So another thing that can impact taxes is that if your assessed valuation does not grow as fast as your maximum levy growth quotient does, it could also cause a little change in your tax rate as well, because it's not being able to keep up with that. But your levy growth quotient or your max levy growth quotient is based off of a 6-year non-farm personal income average. And then you can see what that average is. Some years it's higher, some years it's lower. And they take that 6-year average, and like I said, some of it drops off. So one of the reasons why we had a higher increase over the last couple of years is because you can see in 2013, that eventually dropped off of that 6-year average, and so the numbers became higher with that. And that's what has increased that growth quotient over that period of time. So the far left column represents what we advertised in 2021, which would have been last year's budget. And then the next column to it is what we actually got, or what actually came about from the 2021 advertisement. So it shows that we advertised a low assessed valuation. In 2021, that was our actual assessed valuation. And you can see we advertised last year at $1.06. And then after our assessed valuation came back, it was at 87 cents, but allowed us to get our levy that we asked for to fund our budget. So in 2022, again, we use a lower assessed valuation to advertise a 97-cent tax rate. But if you look at the 22 estimate, we don't know what that's going to be yet. But if I use the same number as what we currently have, that shows what it would actually be, around 88 cents. And depending on how that assessed valuation fluctuates, I would say that could go up or down 3 cents. And if it happens to be $760 million, then that's going to go down 3 or 4 cents probably. And so it all depends on what that final assessed valuation is. The last thing to consider, we haven't considered this in a long time, but we've had to do it in the past. For cash flow purposes, is to borrow money just on a yearly basis to cover any issues that we run in the cash flow. We haven't had to do that, but one thing that has changed in legislation now is that we cannot include that in our debt service budget unless it's been already approved. In the past, we could put that in there with the intention, like we could say, okay, we're going to put $10,000 in our debt service, with the intent that we might have to borrow money that would pay off the interest for that. But we can no longer do that. We have to have the tax anticipation warrant approved by the board first before we can do that. So that's something that's changed with that. But so I did not, in the debt service, when we talk about debt service, there was no estimate in there for any short-term loan for that. So with that being said, then that kind of concludes our budget review, and then we'll go into the budget hearing at our next board meeting.
You're still
The last thing then that I need to advertise before we can have our budget hearing is the Form 3, which this just shows what our budget estimates are, which we went over each of those funds individually in previous board meetings, as well as what the levy is to support that fund, if it's a tax supported fund. And so it will advertise that information along with when our budget hearing dates and budget adoption dates are being held. And this is no longer advertised in the newspaper. It hasn't been for a couple years, but it is advertised online at that website there. And so once that is approved, then I will submit that to the DLGF so that it can be advertised on that website.
I need a motion to allow that to be advertised. So, okay, have a motion and second to approve the advertising of the Form 3 in Gateway. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Moving on to personnel. Under resignation, we have Cody McClure, junior high golf coach, and Stephanie Selick, secretary. Cody was at Northfield and Stephanie was at Southwood. Employment, Rebecca Macy, paraprofessional at Metro North Elementary. Sarah Gaylord, paraprofessional at Southwood Elementary. Kristen Pegg, junior high volleyball coach at Northfield High School. Melissa Span, junior high volleyball coach at Northfield. Cheyenne Ruff, paraprofessional at Metro North Elementary. Tiffany Livesey, elementary volleyball coach. Sharp Creek Elementary, Jessica Freeman, secretary at Southwood High School. Abby Denny, elementary volleyball coach, Southwood Elementary. Amy Matthews, elementary volleyball coach at Southwood Elementary. And then under leave, number 126 and 127, and you see the approximate leave when they begin and when they return. I move to approve the HR report.
Second.
Motion and second to approve HR. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Heartland Career Center report. Matt?
Yeah, we had a short meeting the other day. Schools got off to a good start, they said. They have 640, 650 students. It's up about 40 to 50 from last year, which is great. And they're meeting with some architects to work onto the building, so that's still on the slate. And they're going to talk with them next week, and that's about it. Hopefully they'll figure something out.
All right. Superintendent's report.
Yeah, I just want to say again, this is the 11th day of school and just continuing to witness all of the staff working very hard and also still dealing with the situation with the pandemic. And so we work with a lot of great people that are very dedicated to what they're doing so we can have student learning every day. So just appreciate all of them to continue to do what they're doing because it is taking a lot of time and extra effort to be able to get all that accomplished.
All right. Mr. Drake is not here. Does anybody have anything in his stead? Okay. Under new business, public hearing for formal bargaining. What we're going to do here at this point is that since September, we are going to be doing formal bargaining with our teachers. And so at this point, we are required by law to have a hearing on that bargaining on the teacher contracts. So I'm going to open the floor for anybody that might have anything to say about the teacher contracts. Okay, not hearing any, we're going to adjourn that formal bargaining meeting. Moving on to the recommendation to approve adult meal price change due to IDOE school nutrition memo.
Yeah, so we did this summer, and then the Friday after school started, we got a memo from the Department of Education on the nutrition side that said our adult meals need to be increased since schools that do the SSO program, which means we're doing that program, this seamless option, so that we can provide free meals to our students. The adult meals cannot be cheaper than the reimbursement rate of the free meals. And so that means we have to increase our adult meal prices to meet that guideline. And so the requirement is for adult meal prices to be at $4.60.
What did we say?
$4.
I guess that means that we don't have to give a raise and bargaining at least 60 cents a day, all right?
Seeing no alternative, I move to approve the meal price increases for the adult.
Second. Motion and second to approve the state's mandate to move the school prices for adults up. All in favor, say aye.
I'd like to mention that when I first started teaching, it was 35 cents.
I don't know if you get a milk for that.
I think if you're gonna fight.
Some people claim that was before paved roads and electricity.
Or at least before paved tracks.
He was teaching me before that.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the junior, senior high school improvement plans.
And I just want to mention that the principal's here tonight just to share briefly, very briefly, their school improvement plans. Not a lot of changes from last year, and obviously you know that the testing has changed a lot over the years as far as having testing and not counting and things like that. So they will be very, very brief in this. You have had that since Friday to review it, to ask, 100 questions if you want, but they're going to be very brief so they can entertain all the questions that you have. So we'll start in alphabetical order with schools, so it will be Mr. Snyder first.
All right, the main thing in Northfield is just, we appreciate the technology, but one thing I noticed my first year over there last year is we just need to get back to some things that work, which is, like I noticed during our Norse time, there's a lot of junior hires on their phones, they weren't reading books, they weren't using the time, we don't have time to waste, obviously with the pandemic, they're in and out. We just need to make sure we're using the time. So looking at iLearn data when it came back in, I don't like iLearn. I don't think it's that great of a test, but it is a baseline for us. Our language arts scores weren't good enough. There were some that were at state level, some a tad bit below, but typically I think Northfield should be at or above the state average all the time. So that's the goal that I've been talking with teachers about. And to do that, we brought back a program called Reading Counts that we didn't have last year. Encourages kids to get books and read. Every junior high student's been to the library, got books. When I go by now during our Norse time, which the point of Norse time is to give kids a chance. The high school kids, if they're not doing well in a class, it's time during the day to go to that teacher and get extra help. But if they don't have anything to do, and a lot of kids have their work done, then they need to be reading. My belief is, and I think a lot of the staff is, you don't get good at anything that you never do. And if we're not reading at school and writing at school and doing math at school, we're not going to get better at it if we're just texting on our phones. So we're putting that up. We're getting back to some old school stuff. So that's basically in a nutshell. We love the technology and we use it to keep connected with kids and communicate with parents and all that. But if we're going to get back to reading, writing, and math, and I mean reading and writing and math in all content areas, it's not just the reading, writing, and math teacher's job, the English and math. It's teach them how to read in history class, how to look at primary sources, how to get evidence on what's going on. Teach them in science how to read that science and get information from it. And that's why we're working on getting some new materials for those classes. But it's just, kids got to be doing that. And that's what we're focusing on at Northfield, just to use everything we have and use the time we have with the kids to teach them how to get back to those basics and get better in those areas than what we currently are, especially since we've lost so much time over the last year and a half, 2 years. Pretty much it.
Any questions for Mr. Snyder?
I appreciate that, Jay. And
All right. Alphabetical order, Mr. McDaniel.
Okay, we continue to look at our goals. I learned math and English to be better than the state average for 7th and 8th grade, and on that I learned test. We continue to work on our graduation rate to keep that at a 97% or above, and then also work on our attendance rate of a 97% or above. To work or fulfill those goals this year, last year we looked a lot at our F lists. We generated a failing grade report every couple of weeks or so. And what we noticed from that data is that the rates of failing grades were larger than what they had been in the past. And so to ameliorate that situation, we've changed our BIP committee, our behavior intervention team committee that looked at behavioral concerns, academic concerns of students, to a grade level team format where teachers who primarily teach 7th and 8th grade, 9th and 10th grade, and 11th and 12th grade are going to meet on a monthly basis to review data, to look at kids' behavior, their academics, and so hopefully that's going to provide some more quickness in response and some more collaboration amongst those teachers and awareness of how those kids are doing in the various classes. So that's in a nutshell what we're working on at Southwood.
Any questions there? All right, I didn't get all the way through. I was trying to time it out that I would get That's going to be a little more difficult, and Mr. McDivitt's points. I'm trying to get to it. Sorry, I'm going to have carpal tunnel time we get done getting to this, but because you guys are reading this correctly. Yeah, that's what I thought. So, all right, Mr. McDivitt.
Thank you, Mr. Kefever. Our focus at White's is to continue to work to find ways to help our students graduate without a waiver. We are certainly making progress on that. But we have work to do with the new graduation pathways diploma. There's a part of that diploma, just because of the nature of where our kids are at, are really going to struggle to find a way to check all the boxes of that new diploma. So really our primary focus, and we've looked at creating a locally created pathway, which I assume Mr. Kefever shared with you, that did not get approved. But we're gonna continue to look at that as an option. We're looking at a potential partnership with the virtual school that may be able to do some connection with us when our kids leave campus, to pull in some capability for them to check box 3 of that graduation diploma with a place called the Crossing. So we're looking into that. But the big thing we're doing at school with our staff is implementing a student conferencing model where teachers conference with our students 1 time a week, just to listen to them about how things are going, what their struggles, what sort of goals they want to set, just to help make sure we're keeping kids focused on track of what they can do, and so we hopefully keep them from getting frustrated on what they feel like they can't do. So we would love to get our graduation rate to 67%. That would get us off that federal takeover list. Not that I really think that's going to happen, but that's what we would love to get it to.
Okay, any questions? And just mentioning that, since we have an audience, and obviously an audience online too, I don't know how many, besides my mother.
She's still on.
But when we talk about that, we have to always remember the students that come to us from all over the state of Indiana, and typically an average day of about 6 months. A lot of them come, what we used to call, I don't know if Mr. McDivitt started this, but the transcript looks like Swiss cheese. There are a lot of holes in it. And sometimes it's just a big hole because there might not be any credits, and they might be a sophomore or junior, senior, and in 6 months, you can't necessarily get all that time back to be able for them to graduate. So it's one thing that we continue to talk, and even to the media when it comes out, because typically that will come out as a district graduation rate. And so I have to always talk to them about splitting that up into the different schools because it's a lot different situation. But they do great work there, working hard, and I appreciate what they're doing there too. So I just want to mention that again, just because some people just don't understand that whole situation. So any questions for me? Okay. I'm not going to slide through. If you guys want to read those later, I'll let you have them, but there's a lot more to slide through. So. How long is it for?
It's like 130 pages.
All right.
No, there's no vote on that. We don't have to accept them.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we do need to accept them. I'm sorry.
I'm
moving
just
right
waiting
along.
for a motion.
Sorry.
I guess I should say I need to entertain a motion. Hope you guys, I need to entertain a motion then for accepting the school improvement plans of the 3 schools that we just heard. So,
Second.
yeah, motion and second to accept the school improvement plans. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Now we'll move on to unfinished business, which we have none. And then we'll move on to board policy, the second reading and vote of board policy 1220, electronic participation by board members in a board meeting.
And President Daisy, I did not receive any more comments or questions for the rest of the board, so I would ask for you to approve this new policy.
One motion to approve board policy 1220, electronic participation by board members.
Second. Motion and second to approve the board policy 1220 regarding electronic participation of board members in board meetings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment for any items.
So I have one question, I guess,
Okay.
and I didn't know, since I was gonna be here anyways, I thought I'd bring it up. Northfield hosts their annual cross-country invitational this Saturday at the Field of Dreams. And as a part of the course, Dr. McCann has graciously allowed us to use his trail over the years. And so I met with him on Sunday and picked up the key, and he had just had a conversation with Mr. France regarding an indemnification letter for us using his property for the meet. Is anybody aware of that? This is my first time getting it. I don't know if that's something I needed to talk to the AD or if I needed to get in touch with Mr. France for that, but apparently it's something that's been done in years past. Do you know anything about that?
No. School had to provide some kind of insurance for protection from using his woods.
So his property.
Yeah, his property.
It probably first went through the athletic director at Northfield, I would imagine.
Well, okay. So,
To start with.
like I said, I was just gonna be here anyways, and during public comment, I thought I would just ask if anybody here knew anything about it. Okay, I'll go to Josh
I'm not.
then. Okay. So it was something Dr. McCann asked of me, and I said I'd be here, I'd take care of it. So,
We can always provide a certificate of liability if that's what they're wanting, but
Yeah.
I'm not.
That's this Saturday.
yeah, it's this Saturday, so, okay. I'll talk to Josh in the morning, and then we'll reach out if we need.
Any other public comment?
There's none on.
Nothing online?
No.
Okay. Any items from board members? We're adjourned.